Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Today we make our very own tier list. So before we talk anything else, I just want to make it very clear that these are opinions from someone who's played Warframe a decent amount of time, as well as talking to some friends about certain frames to make sure this list is as decent as an opinion can be. Keep in mind, if your frame isn't in the tier you think it should be, it isn't meant to be an insult. Every frame can be good with the right tenno behind them, and if you want to play a frame, nothing is stopping you. I only say that because I've seen what can happen on videos like this, and if you want to argue in the comments on placement, all I ask is that you be respectful that someone's opinion might differ from your own. All I want to do is give a good idea of which frames are performing better than average, and which ones you might want to avoid. Before we talk rules on the tier list, I just want to make a quick PSA, so stick with me here. I just want to thank everyone. We have gone up an insane amount of subs, and I just can't even fathom that. So thank you guys, and I want to do a giveaway. Now, I don't have crazy rich YouTuber money, but I do play Warframe a lot. So if anyone out there wants to win a prize of Harrow Prime, I can give you all the pieces I have. I know it's really not like the best giveaway. It's the best I can do right now, I'm sorry. But I do want to give it out. To win the giveaway, all you have to do is comment your top 5 favorite frames and your Warframe in-game name so I can give it to you if you win. I can't see who likes and subs, so those other YouTubers are lying. So just leave the comment, because that's the only way I'll know if you've entered. And I'll pick one winner in a week from this video's release. Okay, thank you for suffering through my PSA, folks. Let's talk tier list rules. My tier list video will be slightly different from others that you may have seen. We aren't going to go through one frame at a time placing them in as I talk. I've already made my tier list before writing this, and I'll be showing you one tier at a time, starting from the bottom tier and explaining each frame within that tier in about a 1-paragraph brief summary and like why they're there. It's going to be a quick little paragraph. I'm not going to go super in depth into most of these frames because if I did, this video would take 3 million years and editing it would kill my computer. So, if I don't mention something you think should have been mentioned, just let me know in the comments and I will see it. I look at every comment. So, the tiers are as follows going from the bottom. Boring tier. This is a tier of my own special design, and it includes frames I find boring as shit, even if they're good. So keep in mind, something in that tier can be a good frame, but playing them is like watching paint dry 5 times. The next tier is D tier. These frames aren't quite bad, but if you play them, it will be a little more complicated of an experience trying to make them as powerful as they truly can be. The next tier is B tier. These are just average frames. They can be super good or super bad depending on the player controlling them and the mods they have access to. Now we go to the first tier of frames that are enemy shredders, the A tier. These frames have the power and capability of allowing any tenno to have a good time on any mission they would like. Most frames here are only held back from their highest potential or highest tier in the list because of something small that might keep them. Whether it be a lack of a stat or maybe doesn't do so well in certain mission types, etc. Then we get to the big boy, the final top tier, the S tier. These frames can carry you in any mission type, in any node, steel path or otherwise. These frames are just an unstoppable force and are for those that really want to feel the real power a Warframe is capable of. By the way, the order of the frames within the tiers does not mean anything either. They are just in that tier, not ranked within it. That's the rules, folks. Let's start explaining where I actually placed each of these frames that cover the system. There's plenty of frames to talk about, so I'm going to stop blabbering and tell you viewers how this tier list turned out. So the first tier to cover is the boring tier. Remember, these might be good frames, but I literally can't play them without falling asleep. Excalibur is going to be the first frame I'm putting into boring tier. My quick explanation as of why is his abilities are just lame as fuck in my opinion, except his sword, but they're very basic. Like even his sword's kind of basic and it just gets boring after a while. It gets old pretty quick, you know? Excal he's just not it. So that's why he's my first pick in boring tier. Next up, if you want to fall asleep, is going to be Frost. Although good in defense and such, it's just boring. You barely do anything like the whole mission unless you're like a try-hard Frost. And like I know they're out there, but I feel like most people would agree with me that he's not that fun. Maybe I'm wrong. After Frost is a fatty thick boy named Grendel. If you don't have Grendel, you may not understand why he's here because yeah, he might have some okay abilities entertainment wise, but in my opinion he's not only weak, but after a few uses with him in missions, he just gets boring. If there's any frame that might not deserve boring tier, it could be argued for Grendel, I guess, but even if he was out, he would probably end up in D tier anyway. Next up, we got the frame that makes you feel like a bucket of morphine was just shot into your arm. The Egyptian tomb warrior that is Inaros. He's a tank. That's literally it. Holy shit, that's actually it. He is so fucking boring. You just build armor for anti-status and then do fucking nothing for so long. This is definitely my most hated frame in the game, and I'm sorry if you like him. I just can't stand playing Inaros because all you do is stand. Okay, calming down a little for the next boring frame. It's gonna be Hildryn. She's Inaros but shields, and I know this frame has some pretty serious fans out there, but in my opinion on this shielding frame stands because I personally find her unbelievably boring. I'm sorry, Hildryn fans. Next up is Loki. He's cool and all and pretty decent, but he's just more boring version of the other stealth frames, and that's why he ends up in this tier. He just happens to be the most boring stealth frame, and I do sometimes use him, unlike stupid Inaros, but when I do use him, it's still very, very rarely. Finishing off the boring tier is the Necromechs. Yeah, all of them. I know like only the one is like in the picture there, but this is just a wide thing. I think they're fucking stupid and boring. And if you disagree on Inaros, whatever, but you cannot disagree on this. Necromechs are just more boring to play than frames. Like, I don't understand how someone can have more fun in a Necromech than if they're in their frame. It does not make sense to me. I get so bored. Okay, now that we're done with all that, let's get into D tier. Slightly less opinionated. I mean very slightly, because that last tier was literally just people I personally find boring. Keep in mind the rules here. This tier is going to have playable and fun frames, but they take a little more effort to reach their full potential. Or, you know, they're just not useful as a frame in one of the cases or two that I have in this. And first in D tier, we have Atlas, the Rock of Warframe. He has rock homies and he punches, but that build takes time and effort to make usable in endgame content like Steel Path. Atlas is a niche pick, but has the potential to be less Logan Paul and more Floyd Mayweather with the investment from the player. Next up in D tier is going to be Caliban, a newer frame with sentient power, and yet he's meh. Caliban has two good abilities that help him survive in most average content, but without the investment into his build to specifically prepare for the harder nodes, Caliban is going to get shredded. Don't get me wrong, he's a good frame, just like the rest of D tier, but he needs the time from you the player to make him the sentient god he aspires towards. D tier continues on with my choice of Nyx. There's not really a lot to say about Nyx. She's been in a really bad place for a good bit now, and could really use some help from the homie Rebecca. With investment, Nyx can become a true challenge to defeat your foes. I think personally Nyx has incredibly huge potential with a little bit of tuning, and hopefully you all agree, and maybe soon she will absorb that potential and unleash true chaos. Up next after Nyx is Hydroid the Tentacle Man. This frame was an unsure choice for D tier for a little bit, as I find him kind of boring as well, but the more I thought about this frame I realized that time and effort does make him somewhat useful, as he has an augment that changes your 4 to give extra loot similar to Cora, but in my opinion worse, so I think he fits pretty well into D tier. Next up is the Wraith Sephigoth, probably one of my more controversial picks, putting him this low. But he differs for the reason he's here. You don't really want to invest in Sephigoth in my opinion, as much as just use him in your Helminth to unlock one of the best, if not the best Helminth ability for so many frames, Gloom. Sephigoth himself isn't terrible, but having his Helminth ability on some more powerful frames can amp them up enough for it to be worth it to ditch your Sephigoth than to keep him, and that's why I think he should be in D tier. Finishing off D tier is Yareli. I'm going to say this once and only once. The Wave Rider comic book quest needs to be either cut into a quarter of the time or removed from the game entirely, the latter being my preference. So if Rebecca is watching this, I am 100% sure this is the reason at least 1,000 people have quit this game. This quest is so dumb. And for that reason, along with Yareli being just meh, she goes into D tier. B tier time, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, I don't have a C tier in my list. Who cares? I forgot. It was 3 a.m. It won't change how I feel about these frames anyway. But some of them I might be a little harder on than others. To start in the B tier will be Banshee. We're getting into the average tier to good frames now, those that can do everything but maybe not to the highest level for the average player. Banshee is decent, don't get me wrong, but her 4 is only On the other hand, what easily brings her into the B tier and close to A is her ability Silence. This will stun everything around you, which is beyond helpful in N tier content like Steel Path, and it's also her Subsume. The reason this Subsume frame is placed higher than someone like Sephigoth is that it's super easy to get Banshee's duplicates from the Clan Tenno lab in the dojo, letting you Subsume one easily while not having to waste a lot of time refarming the parts. Okay, before we continue, it's probably a good time to mention one quick thing. I have a new Warframe clan that I made about 2.5-3 weeks ago, and we are building things pretty quickly. It's called Aviator Legion, and we could use you viewers' help. Join in, come on into the clan. Anybody is welcome. If you're interested, just comment the Warframe name, say, hey, I'm interested in the clan, and I should be able to get you in pretty quickly. Okay, back to the vid. Following up from the surely controversial Banshee placement is gonna be Ember Prime. A valid frame choice for any new player, as she has very simple kit. Building up your heat to increase your abilities, power, and your own speed, Ember is probably the frame that best fits into the average title. Next up is Equinox. Although a powerful frame in the right hands, I'm taking into account the learning curve of some of these frames and how I'm ranking them, and Equinox is a standout in this category. As in my opinion, of course, she is one of the more difficult frames, if not the most difficult frame to fully master and use to her full potential. She has 7 abilities to learn, to know where and when to use, including a difference in her 1 as to what buffs are given on switch from light to dark. She can be insane, but to do that, it just won't be for the average player. Limbo is up next. The most hated frame, most definitely when he's your teammate in defenses. But when you're using the right build on Limbo, he can do incredibly well despite your team's insistence on not using the abilities that could save the objective. But I very much dislike Limbo for the sole reason that playing with one on your team can be beyond infuriating. So despite his power potential, he's being placed in the B tier. Nezha follows up Limbo in the B tier. He has decent CC, has some decent armor, also gains a slight speed increase to your slide, and he has a 4 that can kill enemies and make them drop a health orb. And after I say all that, you're probably wondering why he's in B tier, but I think it suits him well. Although, I would say he's definitely one of the better frames in B tier. Playing Nezha for me just seems blank. She's not boring per se, but I feel as though I'm having less of an effect than I should with all of these powers. It may just be me, and if you like Nezha, please tell me your build, and I'd love to see if I could feel more useful with this frame. Rhino follows up Nezha as a very effective tanking frame. As well as having an AoE damage boost for your team, Rhino can be a super quick boy with the right mods. He's strong and healthy and fast, but he has the downside of fun factor. He's just kind of generic. After playing Rhino a good bit, you're most likely going to put him away for a long time. Only exceptions will he be brought out. Coming in next is the Tennocon frame that many probably have now, Titania Prime. She is the god of relic capture speedruns, and she doesn't do much else. She's outclassed in most other areas by other frames in everything but speedrunning, so that's why I've put her in B tier. An Eidolon boy comes next, this being Trinity. She has very useful abilities and is a staple in Eidolon hunts for the buffs to energy and healing she can give, but somehow, just like Nezha, there was something holding her back from the A tier. This is another frame that is on the cusp of A, and to be honest, maybe she deserves A. But for now, she's going here, because I can't think of anything else to say about her besides energy and heals. Tell me a good way to use Trin in comments if you love Trin, and maybe I'll admit to A tier. The very last choice that I've made for the B tier is gonna be the Invis rolling archer herself, Ivara. Ivara has insane potential, but DE saw that potential and said, nah, let's make Ivara's invisibility counteract how we taught people to play the game. And bam, Ivara not being able to bullet jump while Invis was born out of the minds of these dunces. And that's the only reason I'm giving you as to why she's B tier. Sorry, that's all you get. A tier, baby. These frames are those that you want to go out of your way to make sure you master. And this is a very large quantity of frames in this tier, probably the most. And I think that shows a good point that most Warframes are incredibly good and none are unplayable power-wise, even though Inaros is boring as fuck and I'll never play him again. These A frames will be those that a Tenno like you needs to get their hands on, and most of them are being kept from S tier by maybe 1 or 2 small things that hold them back from their true capabilities. Starting off this list of powerhouses is Baruch, the Monkman. He has a ton of survivability and offers a lot of fun. His fist-type melee special weapon is incredibly fun to use and crazy powerful, and the idea of a monk losing his cool over time then just absolutely unleashing hell is pretty interesting to me, and for those reasons, Monkman will be placed in A tier. Who could be the next enemy slayer? Well, it's Chroma. He offers a lot of damage potential and survivability with his Vex armor, and the ability to change element comes in handy very often. I would fully recommend everybody gets a Chroma at some point. His element changes also help a crap ton in the Fortuna max rank mission of Profit Taker, where having many elements is pretty much mandatory. I think Chroma deserves his place firmly in A tier. The tanky rock comes next, Gara. This frame offers plenty of survivability and defensive capabilities for objectives, as well as the possibility for her damage with her lash. Gara also offers a top tier augment, allowing her Spectro Rage ability to pretty much give your team infinite energy, especially when paired with Vauban. It's called Spectra Siphon, and if you're playing Gara, you want this augment. Gara can do so many things and has good augments, not to mention she's simple to learn. Garuda Wolverine comes next into A tier. Garuda has cracked healing, energy gain, huge damage, and the potential to absolutely decimate everything. This frame, with the right user behind them, will literally be unkillable, and I am confident of that. So let's head to the next one. Lavos comes next into the A tier, the Alchemist. Lavos is another frame that has access to many elements, and even on any ability. Lavos has the potential of being an elemental monster when you use his 1 through 3 abilities before using his 4, as his 4's damage will be exponentially increased depending on how many elements are affecting the target you hit with your 4. This guy has massive potential, and that's why he's in A tier. Mirage enters the chart from all sides. This duplicating frame has so much to offer damage and survivability wise, as well as her 1 Eclipse, which is already a very powerful ability, being her subsume, allowing it to be used on other frames, making their potential much higher as well. With the right weapon like Kuvazar or Tenet Archiplasmor in Mirage's hands can be insanely devastating when her clones are up and she has Eclipse active. Next up is the infested survivor Nidus. I have a little bias as Nidus Prime was my most used at the starting stages of the game for a while, but there's good reason behind it. With the right build, Nidus can build stacks like a madman using his 2 to group up enemies and then just spamming stomp a million times till they die. This frame is one of the better ones for long missions that scale pretty high, as Nidus's power will also be increasing the longer you spend in a match. This makes him an easy A tier and a very tanky boy. Pulling you toward the next box with Magnetic Force is the next frame in A tier, Mag. A great starter frame for those who want long-term success in the game, although a little harder to learn than the other 2 starter frames. In late game, getting Mag should be a definite conclusion. She has a bunch of CC and really great survivability with her massive shield gating potential. The Controller of the Dead comes up next. Nekros is a very good tank frame with its augmented 4. As someone who has run very long Steel Path missions with him in survival, he is pretty much unkillable if you're getting the energy to sustain your undead homies. And on top of that, he has his Desecrate ability to grant you bonus loot in a large radius, letting you get even more out of playing him than just virtual immortality. Okay, Prodia makes an appearance as our next frame. Prodia offers a lot. She's really good for Slash, as her 1 grants that, as well as Stagger, and her 3 is basically a healing station that can be used on any frame. It's her subsumed ability at the helmet. And on top of that, she grants a free death with her Temporal Anchor, allowing her to rewind in time, saving her life. I haven't really heard much on her too, so I'm just not going to mention it. If it's good, let me know. Revenant the Beyblade comes into A tier next. The reason he's in A tier is purely because my friend said he heard his 4 was bad, but everything else was crazy. Reeve is very good, as it will leech shields and health from a target when you slash through them. You can make thralls that cost no energy, but to make someone thrallable takes your Mesmer skin hitting them. He takes a slight bit of effort to get going in a mission, but once you really get going, just like Nidus, Rev can be an absolute beast. Next up is the cat lady with killer claws, Valkyrie. She is extremely powerful and potent and is barely on the cusp of B tier. The only reason she is here is because of a very powerful build my friend showed me, including using the augment Eternal War, which grants a buff that makes Warcry gain duration each time you get a kill while it's active, as well as using a certain Vulpaphyla mod will allow Valkyrie to be picking up health drops while she's immune to damage, and when paired with Equilibrium, this will be granting you energy, and that's the key, as it allows you to stay in your 4 forever, along with using Rolling Guard so that you have a free window to recast your 4 in case the drain becomes too strong. The Big Suck himself is up next in A tier. Vauban is an absolute beast in any objective mission or survival type mission. He's pretty much unkillable. All you gotta do is place the big suck in some flechette orbs and keep shooting, an easy win. The only reason he's not A tier is because in missions like Exterminate, there's just easily better picks. As starter frame makes his way up to A tier again with Volt. A beast for ESO, easily murking everything in a whole room over and over with the right nuke build. And as well as this, Volt is used prominently in Eidolon hunts because any projectile that goes through his shields gains a crit bonus, and that includes giving crit to amps. This allows you to kill the shield on the Ido much faster in general, and it just gives a crit bonus to your weapons. Volt is a beast. Sneaking in next is Invis Assassin Ash Prime. Way more fun to play than Loki. With the right set of augments, his shuriken can do crazy damage, as well as armor strip, and he has a stun bomb that makes him invis, and a 4 that shreds enemies all over the map. Sadly, his telly is kinda meh. Geir is the newest frame added to the game as of writing this part, I think. She is an absolute crit maniac. Running crit heavy weapons on Geir, then just activating her 3 with a decent duration build will give you a crit chance buff for like the entire mission, as well as an energy gain buff for the entire mission. Easily, because every kill while this ability is active will extend its duration. My Geir personally has something like 43 seconds of this ability, and that 43 seconds is constantly staying at those 43 seconds because I'm shredding everything. I personally think she might be an S tier, but I just think she's really fun to play, so I thought maybe I might just be a little biased. This script is getting very long, so for the next one, Oberon, all I'm gonna say is OP heals, and you kind of get the gist of his kit and why he's good. Sorry for the Oberon mains out there, but you know, I'm right? Like, he's got OP heals. Nova is our final A tier pick, and for good reason. Her 1 gives her damage resistance, her 4 grants damage increase. Nova also has a capability to use modding to make her 4 do 3 different things that you can build to choose which one. The area of effect she places can either slow down enemies, speed them up, or keep their speed neutral but still grant that previously mentioned damage buff when the 4 is affecting them. With Molecular Fission Augment, kills on enemies affected by your 4 will give you a charge back to your 1, allowing for prolonged damage reduction. Okay. Now is the time. The best of the best. Still my opinion, don't sue me please. S tier, baby. Let's jump right into these enemy annihilators. Sarin Prime comes in as the first in this section of beasts known as S tier, and she's cracked with the right build. She has very good survivability with her Molt ability when you're using the augment called Regenerative Molt. She also has a huge nuking potential with her spores dealing absolutely nutty damage over a gigantic area. Another great ability is her 3, granting toxin damage to your weapons and double that toxin damage to your melee. Killing someone with a weapon affected by this toxin buff will also cause that target to explode with spores, helping your nuking potential. Who is next in this absolute finest list? Well, it's Goss. He's very fast, and that is incredibly fun. Like, once you play Goss, you'll realize how much you'll come to enjoy slamming your head into walls. But not only is he fast, using his red line while spamming other abilities will cause the red line to grow. This will increase your gun's fire rate and reload speed, as well as attack speed and holster speed. Goss is the man if you want to feel like a speeding powerhouse with any weapon you want to use. Harrow comes into the list next into S tier as a staple frame. His ability to grant immunity in a large radius for a short period is incredibly useful, and he can also give himself an infinite shield pretty much if you spam his 1. And if you run out of shield, you can always use your handy immunity period to get ready to get some energy back, because another one of his abilities will grant energy on kills to yourself and squad mates, letting your team become a wrecking ball through pretty much any possible activity. Cora comes into the best tier in the list next, and she is incredibly powerful in any possible activity you want to head into. Her 4 can grant CC to enemies with an augment aptly named Pilfering Strangledome, which will make the enemies who die in your 4 radius drop extra loot. As well as this, her Whip Claw can gain incredible damage and crit damage, especially, using another augment called Accumulating Whip Claw. Also, Cora recently got a Prime that I just finished building as of writing this, and I'm looking forward to shredding an onslaught of enemies with her in the future. And oh, and not even to mention that you can just spam your trap thing on Acolytes in Steel Path and they just can't move. Mesa easily makes it into S tier next. Just pop her 2, sit somewhere high up with your regulators out, and spin in circles. You win literally every time. Easy. It's that simple. She's also cracked in the Grain and Void and will easily let you smelt the max enemies possible every single time. Next up is Sound Queen Octavia. She is the frame for if you don't feel like playing the game. Super simple to do as well. Just pop 1, pop 2, and boom, you have a roving ball of devastating sound waves that'll travel the map and make enemies disappear. This frame being so simple is probably why so many gravitate to her. And don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. Long farms in this game can sometimes get very draining, and having a frame like this can really help with that. Wisp is up next on the Super Homies list, and for good reason. I am sure everyone knew Wisp would be up here. She has been one of the most powerful frames in the game for a very long time, and why wouldn't she be? She plays every role to perfection. She can stun as well as do insane damage using her speed buff flower that grants you a buff to your fire rate, reload speed, and movement speed, and her other 2 flowers shouldn't be ignored either, as one grants a radial damage area around you that will protect you from enemies by shocking them, and her last flower will give you a shit ton more health straight up. Wisp is just cracked all around, and that's not even having to mention anything but her flowers. For that reason, Wisp easily earns a spot in S tier. Easily everyone saw it coming. We enter...
Monkey.
Wukong is incredibly powerful in every way, much like the rest of these S tier gamers. His Cloudwalker allows for insane movement as well as being good for spy missions, and he straight up gets a duplicate he can spawn that will do shit for you, and it has pretty decent power for being an ability. And he can die 3 times with his passive without actually dying, and each death will even grant him a temporary buff. His techniques are just nuts. Everything about Wukong is nuts. And like, a lot of people would say like, oh, he's too easy. It doesn't matter, bro. If you are having trouble with a mission, just play Wukong and you'll win. Alright, we've arrived at the final frame in the S tier. This bird bee can swipe up enemies in a vicious tornado that grant him crazy map control as well as a damage buff to enemies whipped up in your storms. His passive allows him to gain 150% crit chance while in the air, allowing him to rain hell from above. Or just mix that with the damage buff to the enemies in your tornadoes, and you will be a tempest of destruction all throughout any mission you play with him. And that's the just kidding, fool. Unless you notice there's one frame missing from the list. Welcome to S++++++++ tier, and it's only got one participant, and you all know who it is. Zaku, baby. Best frame in the game, no doubt. Everybody's wrong. Zaku for the win, baby. Okay, that's really it. That is the end of the video, the tier list, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching, and especially thank you for the insane amount of growth my channel has had. It's blowing my mind. Leave a comment and like if you enjoyed, and please be respectful if you want to disagree in the comments. But I would love to hear if I messed something up super bad. Just, you know, don't be a dick about it. And if you want to see more content like this, drop a sub. Much appreciated, and good night, everyone.